So when I had the epiphany of doing the work that I'm doing, I was actually living down in Mexico. So I was living in this really small beach town called San Pancho, just north of Puerto Vallarta in the state of Nayarit. And I got really interested in the indigenous group there, which was the Huichol. And the Huicholes were always selling a lot of their wares along the beach. And I started reading a lot about their history, and it just kind of clicked on within me all of a sudden. I just saw this path because I had this realization that I had been studying all these different cultures and cuisines from around the world, and I had a pretty good background. I'd had a chef career for quite a few years at that point, but I had this realization that I could name hundreds of European recipes easily off the top of my head in those languages, and that I knew less than 10 true Lakota recipes that hadn't been influenced by European or any other outside peoples. And it was just really striking, to have that realization, and it really shot me on a path. And I saw what I really wanted to know, which was I just really wanted to know what my Lakota ancestors were eating, what were they harvesting, were they trading with other groups, how were they preserving foods, what kind of tools and pieces were they utilizing for all this, and just so many questions with this kind of indigenous culinary perspective lens. And it just opened me up for more and more. So as I learned more and more about my own ancestry, it started spreading outwards. So I started learning about some of the nearby tribes. And so I moved from Mexico to Montana, where I spent a few years living really close to the mountains and on the plains, and kind of exploring and getting used to identifying and harvesting a lot of these wild plants. Luckily, when I was a teenager, right out of high school, I worked for the U.S. Forest Service in the Northern Black Hills, and I had to learn the names of all the plants when I was young, of everything that grew in the Northern Black Hills, because I was a field surveyor, so I had to go out and identify and age everything. So that bit of education really helped me reconnect.
Yeah.
And so eventually I moved back to Minnesota, and I started doing focused dinners of really trying to explore what is modern indigenous foods and how can you do it in an expressive way that really represents the land and the history and the seasons and the peoples and cultures and all those things. So I remember the first couple of dinners were maybe for like 25 people up in Bemidji, Minnesota. And we were doing like an Ojibwe taste of spring, and we were out there harvesting everything we could. And it just kind of, that notion of modern indigenous food just kept growing and growing. So I eventually formed the Sioux Chef officially in 2014. And it was a struggle because, like a lot of people coming from Pine Ridge, or from reservations, I should say in general, like I didn't grow up with a sense of money. We didn't have ancestral wealth in our family. We didn't have that privilege.
I hear
So
that.
I struggled most of my whole life, living paycheck to paycheck. And when I opened the Sous Chef, I had about $3,000 in my pocket and a credit score of around 420. And it was an uphill battle, but I really truly believed that this knowledge had to be out there in the world, and I wanted to do everything I could to just make it happen, and we've come just strides, since 2014, with the amount of just projects that we have working right now.